Good Shabbos. This week is Parshas Tzav. It's also Shabbos Hagadol, which literally translates as the Great Shabbos. But it's most importantly, it's the Shabbos right before Pesach. And as a result, it's important to know some of the laws, the halachos of Pesach. There are many laws of Pesach. It's one of the more complicated holidays on the Jewish calendar. But for today, I'd just like to focus on something which is needed for preparation for Pesach, which is getting rid of the Chametz. So the Torah tells us, Bal Yira, Bal Matzah, you should not see or find Chametz in their house. And therefore we understand that there's a negative commandment, a los haseh, a negative commandment that you transgress if you have or own Chametz. And therefore the rabbis sort of instituted a few different ways to get rid of your Chametz. One is not actually rabbinical. One, it says in the Torah, it says that you should be tashbisu sa'ar mi batechem. You should get rid of the leaven or the bread from your houses. And therefore, there's a mitzvah of what we call biur chametz, of burning of the chametz. And burning of the chametz has to be preceded by bedikas chametz. That's the rabbis instituted. You check your house. Bedika is to check, to search your house for chametz. You search for house for your chametz, and that would be this year on Tuesday night. On Tuesday night, in Halifax at least, it's after 8:30 at night. You're supposed to check your house for chametz. And typically, it was done with a candle. Today, I think it's much preferable to do it with a flashlight, which poses much less danger and actually gives you a better ability to search places which you would be afraid to go with a candle. And I think it's more effective and less dangerous to use a flashlight. If you use a flashlight, you're supposed to check every place in your house for chametz. Now, when we say every place, it means every place that you usually will bring chametz. If there's a room or a space which you know for sure, 100% for sure, that no chametz ever entered there, then you don't have to check. In reality, you'll be surprised sometimes where you find chametz. I know I found chametz in my own house in places which I didn't expect to find it. Be that as it may, all you have to really do is do a search of the house. And you do that, you precede that with a bracha, which you make, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. You basically blessing God, Asher Kedishanu Mitzvosav, who has sanctified us with our mitzvahs, Tzivanu al biur chametz, on the commandment to burn chametz. So even though now we're only checking for chametz, we understand that checking for chametz is really a preparation for burning chametz. The tradition was to put aside to hide 10 pieces of bread in the house, to make sure two things, that you actually will find chametz if you have cleaned your house, and also to make sure that you check carefully, because if they're hidden, you really have to check. Many people, including myself, do not do that anymore because it might create more problems than it solves. And even though you're now checking and you might not find chametz, the mitzvah is just to look for chametz, not necessarily to find it. Again, in order to perform an actual mitzvah of burning chametz, even if you've gotten rid of all of your chametz and there's no chametz to be found anywhere in your house and your property and your possession, you still have to burn chametz. So therefore, you have to always keep some chametz, at least a small piece of bread or a wafer or a cracker, and burn it. And that would be on the morning of Wednesday, April 5th, and that burning should be no later, it should be before 12 p.m. So you could do it any time in the morning. And at that point, you don't make a bracha, you just burn the chametz. On a year, for example, where it's Shabbos is the day before Pesach, you could perform that mitzvah by throwing it in the toilet or something of that nature. Burning chametz, again, practically speaking, could be done on a barbecue. That's the way I do it lately. Just to take my barbecue, put some bread in there, and make sure it's burnt, but it has to be completely burnt, which sometimes takes longer than you think. So that's one way which is sort of biblically prescribed to get rid of chametz. Number two is what we do is bittul chametz. Bittul chametz is negating of the chametz. That's a rabbinic way of dealing with the problem of chametz, which you might not have found, because we're afraid maybe you didn't find the chametz. So what we do is we negate it by saying this is kahefker or ka'afradar. It's like we're saying we don't want to have any ownership. We renounce ownership, and we in our minds we treat it, it's like just dust. It's really two separate ideas. Renouncing ownership is saying I don't own it anymore. So now if I don't own it, anybody can come and take it. It's not mine. I haven't transgressed the commandment of owning chametz. Or treating it like dust is saying it has no value to me and therefore it is completely nothing. So we use both terminologies when we're doing it. This could be found in a siddur, a haggadah, or you could find it online if you search for bittul chametz. That's in English you would spell it bittul, and therefore you negate the chametz. The custom is to negate it at night after the bedika, after you check, but you only then are only negating the chametz which you don't know about. The chametz which you do know about, which you want to burn the next day, you don't want to negate because you want it to be yours so that you're burning your chametz the next day. After we burn the chametz, we make we do bittul once again, we negate it once again, and then we say the chametz which we know and which we don't know. The question is asked, well, if you're doing bittul chametz, then you shouldn't have to burn the chametz, get rid of the chametz. You don't own any chametz. The problem is, the rabbi said, maybe on Pesach you will find some nice, cookie, and you will, even though you've negated it, now you're saying, hey, I really want that. You take it again, and you'll own it, and you'll transgress the commandments. Therefore, we still have to burn the chametz. It was later instituted a third method of getting rid of chametz, and that's called mechiras chametz, selling of the chametz. This is not something which was said in the Torah, and if you think about it, in ancient times, people had small houses, small little place. They didn't have refrigeration. They had bread, just a small amount of bread, whatever it was, and you get rid of that bread. You don't make bread that day. It's pretty simple. Today, we store bread for long periods of time. We've managed to create bread which has or cookies or crackers which have shelf lives for many years, and therefore we have stores and storages of storage. We store lots of chametz, and there's other chametz products. Again, you can go online, but things which have vinegar, if it's real vinegar, is chametz, and there's cookies, crackers. There's certain things which have in one of the ingredients might be chametz, and therefore, since we have so much chametz, they instituted the idea of selling it to someone who's not Jewish. And really this started not just because we have a lot of products, it really started back when Jews became sellers of whiskey. And whiskey is also another form of chametz, important to note. And therefore all whiskey should certainly not be drunk, but it also should be put away. Again, if you want, you can get rid of it. That's another expensive proposition. But because this was so expensive, and this was the business of many Jews in the Middle Ages, they instituted selling of chametz. And there, again, once you sell your chametz, you could argue, and you don't have to necessarily get rid of your chametz anymore. There are some people who say, even when they sell the chametz, they try to get rid of all chametz except certain items which are not as problematic, which is left for another time. But most people today do sell their chametz. So when you're checking for chametz, you check for chametz. If you find it, you put it in, let's say, a cabinet that could be marked, or a room that's marked. And then the idea is you sell the chametz, and that could be done by selling it. Most of us do not sell the chametz ourselves, but rather because the selling of chametz is another halachic procedure which is somewhat complicated, what we do is we make the rabbi an agent, and the rabbi usually sells it to somebody who's not Jewish. And I send out another email which you could either fill out a power of attorney and send it to me at yakovkerzer@gmail.com, or you could even send either have that power of attorney sent, or you just send an email saying, please act as my power of attorney, or worst comes to worst, leave a message, 902-482-0492, saying that you'd like to make me your power of attorney to sell your chametz. Again, you could do this with anybody who's performing this, any rabbi who's performing this. Again, you have to be careful that you're in the right time zone, because if it's sold in one time zone and you're not in that time zone, you might be having chametz when you're not supposed to. But otherwise, that's a method that could be done. And again, even though we sell the chametz, we still make sure that we check for chametz and that we burn chametz. Now, when you check for chametz, I'm saying, well, you could sell certain cabinets or even rooms in your house. So therefore, the best way to do that is that when you sell your chametz, you delineate this cabinet and this room. And therefore, when you're checking for chametz, as I said before, make sure to put away the chametz in those rooms that you are selling. So those are the three forms of getting rid of chametz, and that's one of the special commandments that we have on Pesach, because you're allowed to own non-kosher food. You're allowed to own any type of food, even though you're not allowed to necessarily ingest it. The only exception to that, by the way, is milk and meat, which milk and meat, once it's cooked together, you're not allowed to cook meat and milk together. You're not allowed to ingest it. You're not allowed to eat it. And you're not allowed to have pleasure from it. So if you own it, you can't sell it. You can't feed it to your pet. You can't enjoy it in any way. Even though I wanted to focus today just on getting rid of chametz, it's important to know there's positive commandment of eating matzah. And the mitzvah of eating matzah is specifically on the night of the Seder. And in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, we do this for 2 nights. The second night is rabbinic. So therefore, both nights of the first 2 nights of Pesach, there's a mitzvah to eat matzah. And you're supposed to eat what we say in Hebrew, kazayas, the amount which is about an olive. My fist is much bigger than an olive. It's not such a big amount, but there's a mitzvah to eat it, and we have 3 times that we eat it. We eat it once by itself, once with korach, when we make a sandwich with that and the maror, and the 3rd time is with the afikomen. The most important one is the first one, and everybody is supposed to eat at least that amount. The idea of having matzah the rest of Pesach is fine. But you're not commanded to eat it. You just cannot eat chametz or own chametz, but you only have to eat matzah the first night. It should be noted that egg matzah is not something which you could use for matzah at the Seder, and egg matzah generally is not to be used a whole Pesach, except for those people who have a problem eating matzah or digesting matzah. Either you have some illness or a child. But otherwise, egg matzah is not supposed to be used. Also, just as a note, the gluten-free matzah that was sold locally is not matzah at all. It's not made out of any of the 5 grains which make up matzah, which is wheat, spelt, oat, rye, and missing one, barley. It's not made out of that. It's made out of tapioca and potato starch, and therefore it's not matzah at all. That is the basic mitzvah of eating matzah, and now that we have on Pesach, which is really special. The only thing you have to do is eat matzah the first night or the first 2 nights outside of Israel, and not to have or own chametz during the whole time of Pesach. And as far as not owning chametz, if you sell your chametz, about an hour or so after Pesach is when the rabbi will then purchase or make an agreement that the chametz goes back to whoever owns it, and then you could start using your chametz. Good Shabbos.